Hello, this tutorial is about learning how to use 3ds Max for beginners, and this course will be focusing on 3D modeling only. I will also introduce other subjects as well, such as user interface, applying simple materials, maybe show some of the animation features, basic animation, not a whole lot, and that's it. So I will be modeling this as a way to show you how to use some of the 3ds Max modeling tools, and if you want to follow along, please do save it. And I got this image from Pinterest, so you can find the image on this link. This is not, I did not design this, I found it on Pinterest. So all you have to do is just save it, and I will show you how to apply it to a material. Before we dive deeper into materials and modeling, so I will be introducing the user interface for 3ds Max, and I will be telling you where to find some of the tools and commands. So let's take a look at the top menu right here. So right here we have the selection tools. This is how you select objects, vertices, faces within the viewport. And here, this is how you move, rotate and scale. And right here, this is where the snapping resides. So like you can use snapping for more accuracy and alignment. This right here, you can use it for mirroring and alignment. And right here, this is where you have access to Layers Explorer, the Curve Editor, materials, and rendering tools. So let's take a look at the side panel. So right here, this one. So this is where you get to create a primitive objects. This is where you can edit that object after its creation, right here. This is where you can see the modifiers, and here this is where you get to name your object and assign a color to it. This right here are modifiers shortcut. You can edit it, you can add any tools you want, you can remove any tools you want. And right here, this is your navigation menu. This is where you can orbit around an object, pan around, zoom in and out. And right here, this is where you can activate auto key, which allows you to do some animations, and the animation keys would be seen on this timeline. And this one right here, these are the position of the object in 3D space. Depending on which transform tool you have active, it will show you the value. So for example, if you have activated the move tool, you will see its position on the X, Y, and Z axis. How about scale? It shows you the scale out of 100, so like how big it is from its original, so the size is from its original creation. And the rotation, it shows you how many degrees is rotated on any given axis. So let's go through these tools one by one. So first thing is first, as we have learned, the side panel, this is where you get to create a primitive object or a geometry. So let's create a box. So make sure the geometry is active and we select a box. So you can go through the center, drag, make sure the left mouse button is clicked and hold, then make it as big as you want. After you release the left click, you can move it up, and once you are happy with the height, just click the left mouse button, and right now you have a cube or a box. So if you do not exit out of it, so once you activate it, you can create as many boxes as you want. So let's take a look at the transform tool, or sorry, the selection tool. So once you click on selection, it will exit from box creation. As you can see here, it's not active anymore. And right now you can select any object you want on the screen. So right here, this box selection, this allows you to, once you click and hold, this allows you to select multiple objects at once. You can select one object at once. You can select all objects if you can fit them in within that selection. So this is good for a single select and multiple select. And if you press and hold, you have access to different type of selection. For example, you have a circular select. So let's click anywhere on the screen to cancel the selected object, and let's take a look at the circle one. So you can see it creates a circle to select, and right here you have a fence, so you can define an area that you want to select. And select whatever that is within the selection tool, or if something is also touching the edge of that tool, it will also select it. And you have a lasso select. This has much more freedom with it, so you don't have to click and define a height or length. And you also have a paint select, so you can select individually. And a lot of those tools is very good with face select, vertex select, and so on. And right here you have a window and crossing. So this one, if you cycle through it, so this one, anything that touches the edge of the selection and whatever within that select. So for example, if we did this, so let's deselect and let's select a group of objects. So anything that is touching the selection area and whatever that is in, it will be selected. But if you go to window select, it only select whatever within the selection area. Anything that is touching, it will not select it. So for example, if we do something like this, have you noticed this box? It was not selected. It only selected whatever that is within the selection area, and that's it. This one, whatever within the selection area plus whatever the selection area is touching. Very good. And now let's move on to transformation. So right here we have the move button. So if you select any object, it will activate this gizmo, and this gizmo will be located at the pivot point of the object. So right here, this is, so for this square, for this box, the pivot is right there. So now you can move the object once you have selected it. If you select a different object, you can also move that. You can select multiple objects if you have the box select and move those together. You can also constrain the movement on two axes, so you can use this box or rectangle area. So if you do that, it will constrain the movement only on two axes, so that would be on the Z and X axis. So you can also do that on the Z and Y axis, and you can also do that on X and Y axis. And if you select this box right at the corner of the gizmo, you will get to move that in 3D space. So this would be a bit tricky, so that's why it is a good idea always to orbit around your scene. And to orbit around your scene, if you click orbit sub object right here, so it would be this one right here. If you select that, then you get to orbit. So whenever you move this, always orbit around and pan around just to see where it has been located. Very good. So you do have option for orbiting as well. So this one is a bit crooked, so let's fix it. I will show you a different way of orbiting that is much better than this one right here. So to exit from it, you can press Q. Okay, so let's go back to the move tool. So the move tool, if you select an object, you can move it on single axis, two axes, or all three axes. And to activate that, to activate the move tool, all you have to do is, let's say this is on select tool, let's say we selected this object. If we press W, it will activate the move tool. So let's switch to rotate. Rotate is very similar to the move tool, so you can constrain the rotation on one axis, and as we can notice, it is rotating based on the pivot, and you could also rotate it on all three axes. So this is not constrained. You cannot constrain it to two axes, but it is a good idea to always use one axis to do your rotation. And if you know what to do with the 3D 3 axis rotation, then you go ahead, you can play with it. So it is better to use one axis at all times. And for the shortcut, it is E. And let's go into scale. So if we click on scale, same thing as the transform tool. You can scale on two axes. You can scale on one axis, and you can scale on all three axes. You can see once you scale on all three axes, you'll see the center triangle turns to yellow. And same thing for the two axes. And to activate that, that would be key R. So if you press on the R button, as in Robin, you can see the scale tool. And you can also cycle through this the transform tool. So you have a uniform transform, and you have the two axis transform, and you have the stretch and squash. So the top two, it will only activate whichever axis you want to scale from. So if you select the top one, which is the uniform one, you see automatically the center one is transformed. And if you do the constraint to two axes, it will activate the only two axes scale. And if you do a stretch and squash, this will depend on the volume of the object. So it will keep the object volume, and in return it will change the height and width of the object. And now let's move back to the move tool. If we select the move tool, so we did talk about these two axes, and this reflects the position of this of the object in the world. So we can reset it by typing 0 in all three. Remember how we altered the rotation? We can also fix it too. So we select E, we press E or select the rotate tool and set that to 0 as well. And same thing for the scale. You can reset it as well. So it would be 100, 100, 100. So it would be 100 by 100 by 100. As we can see here, the rotation is a bit off, so let's make sure it's 0, 0, and 0. And as we can see, the box has been resetted. And let's move on to these commands. So before we move to these commands, so let's take a look at the navigation. So as I've said before, you have access to the navigation right here, but it is better to use the shortcuts. So to pan around, so all you have to do is just click the middle mouse button, and this command is similar to the pan view, which is the hand one right here, so you can pan around. If you want to orbit, you can do Alt and middle mouse button. This is similar to the orbit, this one right here, so if you click it, you can rotate around, and if you use the middle mouse button, you can pan around and then rotate. And to zoom in and out, you could use this command also. So this is with the magnifying glass, so this is zoom in. So this one is a lot more accurate, whereas if you use the scroll up and down, it's not as accurate. But if you want the similar zoom command accuracy, you could use the Alt Z, or especially if you want to create like a new object, you might want to use the command where it would return back to the original previous command. So in this case, you would press and hold Control and Alt and the middle mouse button and move your mouse up and down. So let's review again. Middle mouse button to pan around, Alt and middle mouse button to orbit, and Control and Alt and middle mouse button and move your mouse up and down to zoom in and out. And you could also do scroll up and down to zoom in and out. And let's take a look at these commands right here. So right here you have the Scene Explorer, where you have all the listed 3D objects, or any object for that matter. So it could be lights, cameras, geometry, and so on. You could rename it, for example, pink box. You could look and search if you have everything renamed, and you could also do filter. So let's add like a light for this example. So the light is right here. Let's create a free light, say yes for now, and we can see a light here. So if we turn off geometry, you can filter based on the object type. So I'm going to delete the light for now. And you also have access to the Layer Explorer, and this one right here, you can have different layers. So let's say, for example, you want to create a new layer. All you have to do is just press the plus button and it will create a new layer. And maybe for this one you want to add lights here, and if you create the lights, it will be added automatically to the active layer. So you can see them right here. So, and you can tell which one is active by seeing the green layers icon, whereas this one is not active. So if we create lights right now on the 0 layer, you can see being added automatically to that. So let's say right now we added a camera, so a free camera, and we have this camera selected, and we created a new layer. It will automatically add that selected object to a new layer. So if you have like if you want to select a bunch of objects and you want to add that to a new layer, all you have to do is just select those, and you can do like group select. So if you want to do like be more accurate to that, all you have to do is just press and hold Control and select the objects that you want to add to a new layer, and press on the plus button, and as you can see, it created a new layer for the selected object. And again, on the left side you can see the filters, so you can filter based on whatever. So if you only want to see lights, you can turn off the cameras. You will still see the layers, but they will be emptied, and you can see the listed objects. So let's exit from that, and let's take a look at the curve editor. So the curve editor is aimed at for the purpose of animation. So let's do quick animation right now. So let's select the pink box, and by the way, when you create an object, it will assign a random color to it, so you could select any object if you want. So let's select this pink box, and right here with the arrow key, let's turn that on. So if we turn it on, any movement or any rotation or any property that we change, it will be recorded. So let's move that to frame 40 and just move it on any axis that you want. And right here you can see the listed object on the curve editor. So if we press the position, we can see the movement being expressed in a curve, which is a mathematical curve. So this one is a green, so you can tell it's been moved on the y-axis, and you can see it right here. So any changes that you make here, it will be reflected also on the line editor, curve editor, so you can see it right here. And the only reason you see a key here, even though we did not do any editing on the other position, is because 3ds Max sees that a key has been created for the x-axis and z-axis. So right here you can see the movement being reflected. So if we delete that key, that key has been removed. So anyway, so like any movement, any changes, so this is very similar to Photoshop with the vertex handler, so you can, this will affect the speed and the movement of it, so it can be like ease in and ease out. You could, so this is a lot useful with 3D animation as well, so like for character animation I mean, and you have a lot more control with it. So once you dive deeper into animation, especially in 3ds Max, you will be using a lot of the curve editor. I just added that to this, so I just wanna so let me activate the curve editor again. So I got stuck with the curve editor being stuck to the ribbon, and the way around it, in case just you got stuck with the same issue, is all you have to do is right here on the edge you can remove that. So yeah, I had to retest the scene, which I did not have to it turned out, but so yeah, that was enough about the curve editor. So let's move on to the, so just one last note with the curve editor. So let's create a box right here. And by the way, I created the box by using Control and Hold, and it will create it from the center of the box. And so let's create another animation. So I will press arrow key and then move it to frame 40, activate the move tool and move it on the x-axis. And as you can see here, we can see the x-axis. So you can also change that to a dope editor. And right now I think it would be very similar to how you have it right here. So you can see the various axes, so you can have a lot more control with the movement of special axes. Maybe if you want to add another movement on the y-axis, you can access the y-axis, and you can, so this would be like, especially if you want to control the speed, or you want to add more time to the animation, so this would be a lot faster. And this is good for blocking, and especially if you do not want to mess with the curve editor. But you have access to both now, so you have the dope and you have the curve editor, and you can see any changes that you have made with the dope editor. It can be reflected here and in the timeline, and you can see the animation being created. So I want to turn off the arrow key, and let's move on to the schematics view. So the schematic views is a lot more about the relationship, especially if you are doing parenting. So let's say we create another object right here. So the way I did that, I pressed shift and hold shift and use the transform tool to move that object, and in this case I want to create a copy. So you can see the two objects being listed here within the schematics. So if we use the link key, which is a parenting, similar to parenting, and select that box and parent it to the one in the middle, you can see the relationship expression right here. So let's create another one. So activate the transform tool, shift and hold, and you can tell that right now these two objects are parented to this. So if we move this, if we move this, then we'll move along. So you can see the relationship being expressed here, and you can unlink it. So now, since one of them has been unlinked, you can see the separation and change in behavior once you alternate or change the position of one object. So for now, I will unlink all of them. And you can also delete if you do not want them to. So this is good to see like a relationship between objects. So we have this schematic, and you have now the material editor. So this is where you create your materials and you apply them to the object. So for example, right now these two objects, they do not have a material assigned to them. So all you have to do is just take one material and drag and drop. So drag and drop. And if you select on one of the materials, for example right here, if you change the colors, you can see it being reflected on the object. So pink, for example, maybe you want to make it dark blue. And on this one right here, maybe you want to make that yellow. So this is the materials, and like each material has properties that you can also edit and add to it. For example, transparency, if you want to make it transparent. And you have to be kind of mindful about what type of material you are using and how will it render with the selected renderer. So for example, so this is the materials, and you can also add images to them, and I will show you how to add the reference image to use that as reference. So for example, right here we want to add, so you can do search, we want to add like a bitmap. So bitmap, and it allows you and prompts you to select a map, and you can see the map being shown on the object itself. So it has gone into more options for the map. So in case you want to get out of it, you just want to go to the parent, all you have to do is just click here on the go to parent, and you can see it right here, and you can see the word M assigned to it, which is materials. There's another mode you can access also. So this is the slate material, and so you can see the object being expressed in nodes. So right now, so to see this one, all you have to do is just use the eyedropper, and you can see the node, you can see the materials, and you can see the bitmap being added to it. So this would be a lot similar to Blender's node editor. This one is a bit more advanced, so you can see what we used to see with the compact material editor. So everything is listed here, just in case you are not very comfortable with the node editor. So you can create your maps and so on. You can add other materials as well and do your editing here. You have the different nodes, matte nodes, different type of textures, and so on. So for now, I will go back to compact material editor, and especially if you are working on 3D models for games, you wouldn't need a lot of uh, I wouldn't think you would need a lot of advanced materials and nodes, because at the end each game object will be exported to a game engine such as Unreal and Unity, and their materials is very similar to what you would see with the compact. So let's exit from that. I'm going to delete this one, so, and I am going to center this one. If you right click on the up and down on the position, you will automatically set it to 0. All you have to do is just right click. So let's say we added a value here. If we do right click on the arrows, doesn't matter up or down, it will reset it to 0. So let's take a look at the render setup. So render setup, this is where you select what kind of renderer that you want to do. So you can do scanline if you want to, you can do Arnold, ART. So you can select whatever you want, and you will see a bunch of properties here, and this is where you would select if you want to create a single image rendering, or do you want to do like the active segments, so whatever you have on the timeline. So that would be 0 to 100, and you can actually control that by using range. You can also skip every how many frames that you want, so you could do that as well. And if you want to specify which frames that you want to render, and this is useful especially if you're doing sprites for 2D games. So you want to do your animation in 3ds Max, and you want to select specific frames which will be acting as your sprite. And right here, this is where you specify the resolution and what kind of output that you want to create, which one kind of output you want to create your movie in. So you can change the resolution, the type, and so on. So I will not go deep into this because personally I do not know much, but I do remember when I used to work as an animator, we did a lot of the animation rendering as an ART renderer. So we would look at this at the ART renderer. But Arnold is much better, is much more advanced. So let's exit from that, and right here, that's if you want to see your rendering. So all you have to do is just click render. So because we selected a range of images, it will start rendering those out. So you have to be really careful. So it's not stopping. Okay, cancel. So you really have to be careful with what you select here, because it will reflect. And also if you want to save your output, because right now it doesn't save it, it caches it, so all those frames would be lost. So just in case you want to save it, you make sure your render output is saved to somewhere. And right here you can select, so you have a lot more control with the area to render. So, and I think you can see the area right here. I think you have to activate it somehow. So like here, show save frames, so it tells you exactly which frame it will render and which one it will not. So anything beyond the yellow line, it will not be rendered. Anything within, it will be. So if we create another image object, so we can see that only this part it will be rendered, the other it will not. So if we click render, so it tells you, the save frame tells you exactly which one it will leave in and which one it will leave out. And you have the different type of rendering right here. So this is rendering to production. So if you are ready, all you have to do is just click this and it will start rendering. So far we have looked at parenting using the link and break link. We also explored the type of the transformation and selection. We also took a look at the different windows where you can do your rendering, organization, and animation controls, and relationship between objects. We also take a quick look at the how to animate really quickly using the arrow key. Also, this is the play button where you can see your animation in action. And we also looked at the object properties, which is it depends on which transformation you have selected, and we also took a look at the transformation. So right now let's select everything and delete. I'll press P to change it to perspective and Z to focus on the center of the view. And let's take a look at the objects. So right now on the right side we have the different commands and windows that would let you to create and control your 3D models and animation. So right now what we are seeing is creating a primitive object or standard geometry. And right now once you create a box, you are limited to these properties, so you can control the width, the height. You can also control the number of segments. So to see the segment, all you have to do is just press F3 to see the wireframe, or F4 to see shaded wireframe. So those segments could be helpful, especially if you have an idea how to model your object and how many segments you need. And you can control if you want a box or cube. So a cube, it will make sure that all sizes are equal, but as a box you are in control with the width and the height. And the same thing applies to the others. So whatever you click on, you'll see a bunch of properties right here that you can control. So go ahead and just try those properties, create objects. And I do encourage you to try and make mistakes. So let's take a look at, let's delete these two. And let's take a look at the modify tab. So right now once we select an object, we do still have access to editing this object. But sometimes we want to start to shape that object, maybe to look like something. And the best way to do that is you have two options. You can add a modifier. So right here, this is the modifier list, and we can add an edit poly modifier. This will give us access to vertices, edges, borders, and so on. So if we select vertices, we can make modification to that vertex to maybe look like something. But it would be a bad idea if you try to go back to box, because if you try to add a segment, so whatever changes you have made, it has been removed. So maybe it is within your best interest, like you'll see like unexpected modifications. So it is best within your with the interest of your project to just right click and collapse all, and make sure that you make your changes permanent, and that's it. Do not go back to object and start adding edges. This is what with the tools right here, it will give you that option to add edges, to remove, delete, weld, and so on. So edges, vertices, and polygons, they all have similar tools. So you can collapse, cut, you can extrude, and so on. So the majority, they do have similar tools that behave similarly. A border is if you have an open area. So let's, for example, let's switch to polygons and delete this. A border it's smart enough to detect this. So this would be like a great idea, maybe if you want to extrude, and maybe you want to cover it by clicking cap. And as for elements, so let's select this one and let's Control Shift and drag. So right now we have two objects within one object. So if you click on the schematics, it only sees one object because they are part of one object. But element does see different objects since they are not connected in any way, shape, or form. They are only part of one object. It lets you select different objects within different elements within the same object. So for example, if you want to delete it or maybe detach it, so right here you have detach, and it will detach it to a different object. And if you click on schematics, you can see these two objects differently. So this is good. So let's delete this and let's start to learn more about modeling by modeling the game object that I have found on Pinterest. So for now, let's create a reference. So you could do it through your viewport. I'm not sure how. I'm sure there is a way to do it. I think you go into the viewport properties and add a background. So I think you could do it through here, add a custom image as a background. So for example, you have to go and configure the viewport background, and you can select the image. So you would have it like that. This does not look pretty at all, so I would remove that and we'll go back to the gradient. And the other way that I prefer is using a plane. So this is also a geometric object. So let's create a plane. As we can see, we are seeing segments. I don't need those. We can use the right click on the mouse to reset it to 1 by 1, and let's press E for rotate and rotate it. So right now we can see the rotation is not being snapped. So we have snapping commands right here. So we have the 3. As you can see, you have 2, 2.5, and 3. I'm not sure what the difference between these 3. I always have it on 3. I think this has to do with the 3D and 2D and 2.5D. So I'm going to select 3D, but this is only for moving, so this does not snap rotation. And to access the snapping option for the 3D, all you have to do is right click and you can select which property you want to snap to. So for now it's selected to grid points, but once we start with the 3D modeling, most likely I will be switching it to vertices, so vertex. But since we don't have any vertex right here, you would not see the effect of it. But you can see the yellow line indicating that it is looking for a vertex to snap to. So I will turn that off, and I will turn off snapping, and let's take a look at the angle. So if you click on it, it will be turned on, and once we start rotating, we can see it's being snapped. And you control that, you can control it by selecting the angle. So you can select, for example, only snap to 90 degrees. So you can see it's being snapped to 90 degrees, or maybe 45 degrees, if that's what you would like. So for now, I will change it to 5. 5 seems a lot more reasonable. So right now we have a plane created. So let's center it by right click on the, sorry, this is rotation. Be careful, because if you right click, you'll reset the rotation, and we do not want that. We want to reset the position. So let's undo that, switch to position or transform, and right click on the location of the plane. I want to move it up a little bit and move it to the back. So let's create a material. So if you remember, this is the material window. So we click on it. And how do we apply a material to the object? All we have to do is just take this material, drag and drop, and we can see the material right here. So let's click on this material, and let's click right here to add a bitmap image to it. So to this empty box. So we click on it, and we look for a bitmap. You can search for it, or maybe you can go through the list, and let's choose the image that we have saved, and you can see it right here. So right now we can see the image is being stretched. So how do we adjust it? So there are two ways. Remember, when you select the image, you are within the bitmap properties. So you could adjust it from the UV. So this is the, I believe it's the, I think, so this is with the rotation. So as you can see, I have an issue with my video card, so you could do this. Change the angle to 90 degrees, and maybe adjust the tiling. As we can see, it's being repeated. We could say no. We could do that. And we could stick with that. The other way, what do we do? So we can rotate the image by 90 degrees, and using the scale tool to scale it as well. So there are multiple ways to do one thing. So it's not a big deal. It's up to you and what you are comfortable with. So right now we want to freeze this image. So how do we do that? Remember when we went into the Layer Explorer? Let's activate the geometry filter so we can see the object. So right here we can see a bunch of properties. So we can see display as object, where it hides it and only shows the outline. The rendering, so this makes sure it will not render. So right now if we open the render window and we press render, you will be able to see the final output. If we turn that off and click render, it will make sure it will not be rendered. So for now, most likely I do not want it to be rendered because this is a reference image. And right now we can see frozen. So what happens if we click on frozen? As you can see, it becomes gray. And you can tell it's frozen when the text becomes italicized. And if it's frozen, it will not let you select it from the viewport, but you could select it from the layer explorer and you could move it. But aside from that, you would not be able to select it from the viewport. So how do we remove the frozen color from the gray color from a frozen object? So all we have to do is, since this object cannot be selected, we could go on the object within the layer, right click and click properties, and right here you can see show frozen in gray. So we just want to turn that off, and now we can see the object. At the same time, it is frozen. We could also do that from the object itself. We select the object, let's unfreeze it, select the object, right click and click on object properties and click freeze right here, and make sure that frozen in gray is off, and then press OK. And right now we have a reference image that we can reference at all time, just in case this does go to black, and I think that has to do with the emission, I'm not sure. So we could go on the materials, and right here we have emission. So if we remove that to 0, it doesn't do anything. So let's move that to 1. So let's right click on the material here and let's do copy and paste, and still it doesn't change much, but if you render it, you can see it emitting light. So it will be lit. So it's set to not being rendered. So I'm not sure why it does go to black right now, but that's okay. So let's go into the left view. If you press left right here, press L for left on your keyboard, you will not see the image, so press F4 on your keyboard or F3, so that will change it to color, and press G to hide the grid. So let's analyze this piece right here. So how do we construct this piece? There are multiple ways of doing it. We can use a box, and we could use a plane, but for the simplicity's sake, let's start with the box. So let's create a box. Let's make sure this box matches the width and height, and once you can select a box, it will ask, with the movement of your mouse, it will add that depth to it. And right now, if we press Alt X, it will change it to an X-ray mode, so we can see through it. And those segments, we do need a lot of those segments. So maybe we need like 3, and maybe vertically, maybe we need 1 or 2. So based on my judgments, I don't want to see vertical heights. I will add them manually because it will make the job a bit more difficult. So right now, because you need that geometry to flow in well, and so what I will do for now, I wanna do some analysis. So I will select the plane and I will move it out like that as a copy, just to take a look. So right now we can see the middle being created from here, and based on the width we could tell this one is a bit thick, so we could add some thickness to it. And let's start modeling. So let's go into, so I'm used to the front a lot, so I think what I'm going to do is rotate all of those. So I will unfreeze the references, so I'm going to unfreeze them, select all, go to front by pressing F. If you're not sure how to get to front, just click on the perspective and change it to front, and you can see the key, the shortcut. And I'm going to start rotating until it is 90 degrees. And then move that to the center. Press G to hide the grid. And let's start modeling. So, how do we let's freeze the reference image before we go any further, because I don't want to select them by mistake. It might become annoying after a while. So let's select this and let's start modeling. So how do we make it editable? We right click on the object and convert to editable poly. You can do it from the object, and you can do it from here, convert to an editable poly. So as I said, I think those edges is too much. So if you double select the edge, it will select it as a loop, the whole loop. So I think this is a bit too much. I don't want that many vertical edges, so I will press and hold Control and backspace to delete it. Press Control and backspace. Why Control and backspace? Because if we do only backspace, we will see vertices, and those vertices will create an n-gon. This is not, we do not need this, especially if you're creating an object for a game engine. So we undo, Control, so we go into edges, select that edge, Control and backspace. If we go into vertices, we can see those edges has been gone. So we do the same. I want to do the same. It's up to you. If you can do it, if you can model with that many edges, go for it. I just want to show you the basics. So right now the side ones are okay, so we'll switch back to vertex. See, make sure you box select, because you want to select all those vertices, because if you only do one, if you do this, you will not select the other ones, and if you do that, guess what, the other one will not be moved. So box and select, it will select all of those. So I will go into X-ray mode by pressing Alt X and start shaping. So we start moving those vertices until it matches the design. And have you noticed, I do not change do not move the vertex on more than one axis. I'm comfortable doing it with one. That's fine. Why? It's a lot more controlled. It feels a lot more controlled. So same thing, you move this one right here, and we want to create that curvature illusion. So we want that curvature, and make sure that you can see the wireframe, because we want a smooth flow. So we need to do that. So we need to see a nice curvature, and make sure that the geometry is flowing well. And now, what do we need to create? We need to create that. So how do we do that? We select those, the outer ones, and we leave the middle in, and we do that to the other side. Go back to front and move that in, which is okay. You can always move. Make sure it matches the design. And it's okay to make mistakes. That's perfectly fine. And now we have created the basic shape. So how about this one? So this one stems from right here. So, but this one has already been moved to the furthest. So it means that we need to move this in. But this is too much work. Is there an easier way to do it? Yes, we can do it through. We can do it through symmetry. So I will show you that right now. So but right now we are creating the object and it looks good. Make sure that the geometry flows in nicely. So we want to see a nice flow of geometry. Once you start working for a game company, they want to see a nice flow, geometry flow. Okay, so let's move back to shaded mode by pressing Alt X. And right now, so there is a key concept in video games where you need to keep everything as polygonal. But right now, this feels uncontrolled because we have that curvature. We need that curvature. So what do? So within the vertex, we have a tool called cut. This is where we can make a cut between vertices. So it has created that cut for us. And from that cut, we can create edges. And with those edges, we have access to vertices that we can control. So if you go front, Alt X, and we have access to this vertex for a better control. So how about those cuts? Can we make that using a cut tool? Of course. But for now, let's turn on symmetry. So how do we do that? So we go into top mode and we delete. So remember, once you keep pressing the same key for Q, which is select, if we keep pressing it, it will cycle through. So I want to go to a square select or lasso select and select 1/2 and delete. So right now we have 1/2. So let's add a symmetry modifier. And now we have a symmetry, and here's the properties. So you want to select the proper axis. Which axis? We might want to try some of that around. And it creates that mirror. So if you expand on the symmetry, it creates that mirror based on where you had your origin or your pivot. Because we had the pivot in the middle, you can see the mirror being offsetted where the pivot is. So for now, we can change the mirror. So like, how do you do it more accurately? Remember this snap tool? All we have to do is activate the snap tool, right click on it, and change to vertex, because we want to snap to a vertex. So if we do that, it is perfectly set to one of those vertices right on the edge. And now we can make changes on one end, make sure the end result is active. So if we change one end, so I will turn off snapping by pressing S, you can see the modifications being done on the other side. This will make your workflow a lot easier and simpler. So let's create some of those cuts. So how do we create those cuts? Like I said, we use the cut tool, but you have to make sure that we have polygons and tris. So the worst case is triangles. We do not want triangles, even though once you export the game object it will be set to it will triangulate everything. But as a good modeling practices, artists and studios, they want to see a nice flow of polygons. So for now, let's change the axis right here. So we have a nice edge flow. And let's go Alt X so we can see a cut here. So how do we create a cut? You can go into vertices or you can go into edges. You will see this similar tools, so we can create that cut. Right click to accept the changes. Let's go under let's exit from X-ray view, turn off grids, and let's select faces. Now this face has been selected, let's delete it. So right now we want to cover this. So how do we do that? We already have active symmetry. The best way to do it is we make sure you exit from the face mode, go into symmetry, and let's add another edit poly. That way we can build on the changes that we built previously. And remember border, where we can select an open border and we can cap it. So we press cap. It has been capped. But this looks very unpleasant. It looks uncontrolled. So how do we control it? Same thing as before. We use the cut tool and we can make an edge by selecting two vertices. So now this feels a lot more controlled. So one of the questions that you might think of is, how do we center the pivot so when we create another symmetry on top of this edit poly? So you go under hierarchy and you click on the effect pivot only, and what we want to do is center to object, and now this is centered to the object. Make sure you press effect pivot only, so to make sure you do not make any sudden changes that will change the location of the pivot, and now you are good. So right here, how do we create this cut right here? Again with the same tool. So we go into the edit mode, go into the front and turn on the X-ray mode, and let's create a cut tool. Also in the ribbon right here under modeling, you can see the cut tool, which is the same, so we can make these two cuts as well. Notice here we have created uncontrolled and multiple edges face, so we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So how do we end that? We make another edge. And now let's switch to polygons and select those faces and delete. Did you notice we only created one half? So I will delete the other half because I know I will create a symmetry. Just delete. And let's create another cut right here. So how do we do that? Again with the cut tool. So we select the cut, we create 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So this one This one is a bit different than this one. And now let's create a symmetry just to see how it looks like. So this would look like a lot similar to Photoshop, where you have like layered changes, but make sure that you do not go back and do make changes, because you might create unwanted changes. So let's go into polygons and let's delete that, and let's start making that edge. So how do we do that? Go under edge, we select one edge and we extrude. So how do you extrude? We have the extrude command right here. We can press on settings, so we can control the extrude. We can press OK and move that face. Remember the snap, so we right click and we have vertex. So what we could do is turn on snap by pressing S and snap it to that vertex. So what's another way of extruding? Using the shift command. So we press and hold and shift and move that edge, and you will create a face. You see how it's snapping to vertices? So let's snap it to this vertex. So what we do is we press on one of these vertices and start changing it, but it will create unwanted results. So let's change that to a vertex, press these two and snap it. We select this one and snap. Okay, so we are presented with few issues here. The first issue is these vertices are not welded, they're independent. So how do we weld those? So we select both vertices and we press weld. So most likely, if they're not close to each other, they might not weld, but those, because we use snaps, they are very close to each other, so it will weld. So if we see, make sure you box select, don't select only one, because it will only select one which is independent of the other one. So make sure you box and select these two and click weld. Same thing here, weld. Same thing here, weld, and same thing here, and we weld. So if you test it, it is one vertex. Make sure you do not box select to make sure it's welded. And right now we have two independent vertices. So what do we do with those? We do target weld. So we're telling it, I want you to be welded to this vertex. And this one here, they shouldn't be targeted, it shouldn't be welded, because there is the distance between the edge and that cut. But we do see a face being created, so we do create that face. And a lot of time when you start modeling, you will need to switch between an edge and a vertex, maybe. So I did press shift and dragged, but as you can see, it's only one vertice, so we'll need to do a lot of target welding here. So make sure you switch to vertex. Target welds works a lot better with vertex. You could do that with edges as well, but since we want to control vertices, we do that with vertices. So, and now we have created those edges. And symmetry, remember we want it on the other side, and it is the mirror still not resetted, so we select the mirror and activate snapping, and make sure we select the vertex on the edge. So right now this is not being centered, so let's do that. Let's center it. We go front, and the rest is good. and now you have your first piece and it looks good. And we still have this one here open. So this one is a bit different from the other ones. The other ones, you can see the cut is being mirrored, and you can see the cut is not going through across, it's going on an angle, which is based on the image right here. But this one is going all across. So this will requires us to exit from the symmetry mode. So what we do, for now, I will do collapse all, because I don't like to see layers. I like to see one object and that's it. And then I will create a symmetry on top of it. So you could add that as a shortcut, so I can see. So this is how it looks. But for now, I want to hide it because I want to cap this face. So I want to go into border, select the open area and cap it. And for now, let's cut it. So I'm going to select the two vertices. And for now, just for the sake of safety, in case if I created a symmetry, I don't have to recreate that edge. But as you can see, the vertex is not being centered. So we can constrain it to one axis. So what we do is we right click on this, and I think you go under options, and we want to enable a single axis constraint. So if we do that, it will only change it on Y axis. It only change it on one axis, not all axes. So this is good, and we are done with this piece. So we only have one issue right here. We can see an n-gon, so we can see one edge, two edge, three edge, four edge, five edge, six edges. We can see 7 edges. So again, this is not preferred, especially when you're doing modeling. So let's create another edge. So since this is for a game object and smoothing will not be a part of this, I'm gonna make it into a triangle. So this is fine in video games. And same thing here, we want to do that. So this is fine as well, because again, we're not going to apply turbo smooth. We will apply a texture on top of it and hand paint that texture. So this is okay, this is perfectly fine. And let's do a symmetry so we can see it on the other side as well. And this is perfect. And right here also we can see, if you click show end results, so you can see the changes at all times. I will also cut this and just apply it to another edges. This is also fine for video games. For as long as game engine, this is good. If you're doing it for a movie, then do it that way. For a movie, what you do is you create a proper edge to it and make sure it smooths well. So this would be removed. But since this is for a game object, we do not care about that. Triangles and polygons is okay in game object as long as you're doing the hand painted textures. If you're doing a high poly, for now, yes, be mindful. Make sure they are all polygons, and when you smooth it, it looks well. But for a low poly hand painted, yeah, that's not much of a concern. Okay, this is perfect. Let's go into the front view. And let's look at the other piece. So let's create this one right here. So how do we create this one? So this is simple. So it doesn't have to be a rectangle, it can be a cylinder, but in my case, because this seems a lot more complex, it might create some issues. So in my case, I will use a line. So let's create it. So let's do 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Let's do that. But this is a separate object from the other one, so we might not want that. Or let's go on the edit. Let's select this one, and what we want to do is we want to enable an viewport, so it will create a shape. So let's adjust the thickness of it, because we will convert this to an editable poly. So right now we have an issue. We lack curvature. So what we do is we go into segment, we select the segment, and we have an option called divide. Divide right here. So it will create a vertex right here. So I'll turn off snap. Make sure the curvature, the line follows the curvature of the object. And maybe this one you can extrude by using shift. And now let's go on, let's scroll up and enable a viewport, and we can see the shape being created very quickly. So as far as this concerned, this is a line, it's not a polygon. To change into a polygon, we right click on it and we convert it to an editable poly. So let's go into the object mode. Let's go into element. Is it a separate object? Yes, it is. So what we need to do is we need to merge that. So how do we do that? How do you merge that? There are multiple ways. One way is to create a cut around it and then weld it. So you have to go in X-ray mode, or what you can do is, so let's change this a little bit, go on this face and delete. And then maybe, yeah, this is getting very complex rather very quickly. So what we do is we go into element, we select this and we move it, and let's start creating a cut around it. So for now, let's do symmetry, because symmetry will save us a lot of time. So let's select the 1/2 of those faces. So let's go into polygons, select 1/2 and delete that. This will save us some of the trouble. And now let's switch to the cut tool and let's start cutting. So we have one vertex here and another vertex here, another vertex here, another vertex here, and another vertex here. So we have created a shape, and let's delete those shapes and let's start doing target welds. So let's select target welds So let's go under vertex and select target welds. Right here, okay. And let's start welding. And now let's get rid of anything that makes it like look like an N-gon. So we can see another edge have been created here, and this looks good. And let's go into the front view, and we can see this is being, it has a different shape, so let's trace that. As you can notice with the modeling, a lot are moving, cutting, extruding, and so on. Let's select these two, make sure they are moved. Let's make that a little bit wider. Let's take that, rotate, and make it a bit wider. Same thing right here. I think this, let's move it a little bit and make it a little bit wider. And right here we can see an edge being formed, so let's make sure that flows well with the geometry. This is very important. Okay, let's move that up. We will not worry about the metal for now, so this should be a lot thinner. So let's add an edge loop. You can use Swift Loop right here. So make sure the flow of geometry is good. And this one as well. So let's add another edge loop right here, because this seems a bit thinner. So let's also sure that the edge flow is good. So the edge flow it is important on both axes, on the vertex, on the vertical and the horizontal. And let's also move that. And let's add another edge here. And right now I want to do a cut and take that and just move it out. And right here I can see it's going in, so let's add another edge loop. And let's make sure the flow of geometry is also following with the design. So right now, right here, we can see an inset that is going in. So what we can do is we make a cut. And let's just cut those faces. Delete. And let's make those edge loops by using cut. And this is the nature of 3D modeling. A lot of cuts, moving, extruding, and so on. So I do see a lot more, so I will not do that. And I can see like a lot of inconsistency with the geometry, so let's fix that. And that would be part of the modeling tasks for a game. So right now I see that which is not consistent, so I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete this edge because it serves no use. So far I'm not sure. I don't think if 3ds Max is seeing this because I cannot select this, so like 3ds Max is a bit buggy. It's not the perfect tool in the world. But for now, this looks good. This is something wrong with the 3ds Max itself. I think there's a bug to it, so this is, I cannot select this, it's not making sense. So we could try deleting this and selecting the border, and so it's not going. So another tool that we can learn right now, it is the bridge tool, where we can bridge between edges. And as you can see, we will need to create an edge that will flow to the center. So let's go to the right side and let's do right click and hide and select it, so we can hide the axe or the knife itself. And let's create an edge by selecting shift and hold. And another useful tool that we can learn in modeling is a planar tool, where we can make this flat. So to do that, we have make planar, make sure which axis you want to flat it on. So I think this one would be on the y, not the y, the y axis. Maybe this should be on the x axis. No, it's not. Then it would be on the z axis, and there you go. Let's activate snap to center it to a vertex. Perfect. And let's do, so those that have to be a face. So the only issue with it right now, because if we want to create a bridge between faces, it has to have at least 4 vertices. So we only have 3 here, so that should be an issue. So one way to do it is, I'm not a big fan of it, is we shift and move and we do a target weld. So we go under vertex, target weld, and we start targeting weld vertices. And this is good. And here we can just do target weld, and this is good. And with this one for now, let's just move it to, so it looks a bit better flow, and maybe this edge is just too much. I think it's too much. Maybe it is better to have its own edge. So the same thing right here. Maybe we can. So I think there's another tool within the modeling which is called create. Create shape. Not this one, no, sorry. Create right here. So I think we can, let's activate snap and let's start creating shape. Let's see. It's not responding, so let's do that again. Nope, it's not working. Okay. So for now, what I'm going to do is just select these faces. I will do extrude and then planar on the z-axis, and let's snap that to the edge just like that, and maybe collapse these two, collapse those edges, so collapse and collapse, and let's do a mirror or a symmetry. So let's apply the symmetry modifier and let's change the axis to z-axis, and this looks good. So far this is looking good, and let's do right click and unhide all, and right now we have two of the objects. And right here, after you have created symmetry, we can create an edit poly, and we can select this one and cap it. Same thing with this and cap it, and same thing with this one and cap it. But this one right here, you might want to make it a bit thinner to match with the design, and you also need to do the cuts, so it is polygon, so maybe you can and then from the center with the purpose of so I use Alt to deselect, and I'm going to make that a planar. On the z-axis. So you do have to do the same for the bottom and the top one, but right now I'm too lazy to do it, so you can do it yourself. And now let's take a look at the last object. So I'm going to right click and collapse all to apply all the changes. I'm gonna move that to the side and take a look at this. So the same thing applies. So this time I'm not going to use a square or a box to create this. I'm going to use a plane. Let's go into the X mode and let's start shaping it. So I'm going to edit poly. I will be doing a lot of extrude. So let's go into edit poly and let's start shaping. 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, this is good. As we can see, this should have depth, but I will not worry about that for now. Maybe this should have created depth in this way. Let's go to the front and let's use shift and move. Let's move that all the way to the end. Perfect. And let's add an edge loop right here. Let's switch to vertex and that. Perfect. So there is a nice tip, because those two colors look funky. I hate those. So I'm going to into materials, select an object and empty materials and just apply it to the selection. And what I'm going to do is select these two and change the color to black. So this makes it visually more appealing. And so let's move that to the front. And let's make sure that the new created object matches the design. So let's go to top. So from the looks of it, this needs to be a bit thinner. So let's make that thin. And let's move that in. So it's a bit too deep. Let's move that out a little bit. And let's move that in a little bit. So to make sure it does not penetrate. And let's select that edge and let's extrude it in. Let's use snap tool to make sure that it is snapped to the center. Perfect. And let's move these edges. Turn off snapping tool and let's bring that in. Does it match? Yes, it does. So what do we do now? So there is another tool that we want in order to make that inset, and it's called inset. So let's select all of those and let's do an inset. So before we do an inset, let's take a look at bevel. So we want to make that a little bit smoother on the edge. So there's another tool called bevel or chamfer. And what you can see is if we expand that, you can see it's creating an edge and a loop. But the loop in the reference image is a lot sharper. So let's make sure that it is set to 0. It's perfect. And before we go any further, let's add a modifier called shell, which will give it a thickness. So this is similar to extrude, but it extrudes it a lot more uniform and nicely. And we can add an edit poly on top of it. So we need to remove those faces, especially if we're doing a symmetry. If you're doing a symmetry and those faces are closed, it will cause issues while smoothing. So let's give it a, So let's select those faces and let's give it some thickness. So I'm going to move it out a little bit and then make sure that that edge is snapped to this edge. So let's select S for snapping and move that along the one axis, and there you go. So to create that inset, we're a bit too late for the inset, so instead I will use chamfer. So I will select all those polygons, make sure you turn off snap because it might create unwanted results, and let's do chamfer or bevel. And let's take it in, and that's it. This is good. I'm going to delete those faces because I do not want a bevel at the end, so instead okay, so this is good. We're making a lot of progress, and let's do the same here. We create another duplicate, so we save a lot of time with the modeling. And let's hide that. So we do right click, hide selection, and let's adjust the shape of it. So we select this one, go into vertices, and let's start use box select, and let's start moving those faces. Make sure the snap tool is off, and again make sure the edge flow is going good. We do not want lack of fluidity. So let's make sure that it is that all the way to the end. Need the stick. And this is good. Okay. Let's make we have a good edge flow here and a good edge flow here. Okay. This is perfect. Okay. Let's do right click and unhide all. And all is left is creating the bolts. So let's apply the same material as the other one. So let's activate the material window and let's use this button right here to assign the material to selection. So this looks good, and now let's create the bolts. So let's select those ones and right click and hide selection so we can see the bolts. And of course for this one we will use the plane tool. So we'll create a plane, go into X mode. If you want, if you go into material and let's switch this, or just 1 second, let's see, let's go under layers and change that display as a box. But if you make any changes to the plane, so let's create this and let's add edges. You might not see the changes that you're making, so it shows as a box, so we might not want that. So one way around it is we just want to see the wireframe, correct? So what we can do is let's create another material right here, and let's change that from physical material, and let's go on the drop down, and let's select show incomparable. And what we want is a standard material. So we have this standard material and we have a standard surface. So the standard surface is not incompatible. So if you select it, it's not incompatible. But it does not have a wireframe object option. It might, I'm not aware of it. But if you go on the standard button and click standard materials, and we select the legacy one, right here we see wire. So if we apply this object to this, and let's go under the, let's exit from the X-ray mode. Now we can see it as a wireframe. So now we have access to visual. So maybe we use the cut tool to make some of those. In case you're not sure how it's turning out, you can turn on X-ray mode so you can see it in more details. So it is creating a lot of triangulation. So if you go under X-ray mode, we can see those edges. So we do not want this one and this one. So Control and backspace. So we are creating a lot of n-gons, so we do not want that. So let's divide that. Just like that, and let's go under materials and turn off wire because we're done with the modeling. All we have to do is just go under polygons and just push it out, just like that. And now we have the first bolt, and let's copy that and paste it here. So by shift and drag, so it will be selected as a copy. We do not want it as an instant, because instant will be the exact duplicate of this. So whatever changes we make of this, it will be affected on the second one. So this one, let's make some of the changes to matches the new bolt. So I'm gonna change it to box select and start changing. So let's make I will activate the wireframe mode because it's kind of difficult to see. So I think this edge is not needed anymore. And let's go into vertex. This looks good. Let's activate the material by pressing M and turn off wireframe. And this looks good. I am too lazy to model those other ones, so I will just copy and paste and maybe make the changes a bit similar. So maybe change this, change the size, and maybe rotate it a little bit just to make it look a bit unique. And maybe just move that vertex to make it look different. I don't know. So the idea is to reuse already created assets. So same thing with this one, just keep changing things around, maybe rotate. Just do the best you can. And that's it. Okay, so let's do unhide all, and let's move those, or maybe move those. Let's see if they're aligned. Yes, they are. So let's take these, move it up front. Okay. And now before we go any further, let's fix those faces. So let's select the cut tool and let's make those cuts. And same thing for the bottom. And now what I will do is remove the 1/2 because we need to unwrap it. So let's go to top view, go into X mode and select polygons, and let's select the 1/2 and delete. And the same thing we want to do for this one, and this one has a symmetry, so we can delete that. And let's select the polygons, select the 1/2 and delete. So for now we have only one-sided, and now let's unwrap it. Let's make sure that all the materials are the same, so let's press M for materials, and let's assign the material to selection, and let's change the color to black. Now it looks nice and sexy. And now let's unwrap. So to do the unwrapping, all we have to do is just go on the modifier and select unwrap. And before we go further, I do have a really old computer, and I know it will freeze. So what I'm going to do is save my scene, because I know it will cause me a lot of headache, and just change that to X tutorial. And now let's select the modifier and select unwrap. So before I unwrap this, I will select a projection map, a projection, so it will project the whole thing. And before I can do anything, I will reset it, and then use the plane tool. Maybe I want to fit it, I think. Maybe use a box. I tend to try a lot of things before I go any further. So for some reason the plane is not. Let me just remove that, and I want to apply reset XForm. This will reset the object so that it will reset it also all its values. So whatever current values, it will make it as the new default values. So I'm going to do reset select, go under edit. I can see the reset XForm right here, and I'm going to do collapse all. And now let me add the unwrap modifier, and still same thing. At least I've tried the reset XForm, and let's do fit, so it's not fitted. And after like you have so for some reason it is not resetting, so I'm going to modify it myself. Maybe just after you do that, we want to quick peel. And after you do a quick peel, you can see being unwrapped. So this we need a lot of fixing. So wherever you see the green line, it means it's broken into pieces. So let's see if we can reset it. It did not merge any of the lines because I want it as set as one line. This can be sometimes exhausting to work with, so let's try a box and see quick resets, quick peel, and same thing. Maybe let's do a belt map. I think this will stitch the whole thing. Okay, so maybe I will go into faces, select all polygons, and do start belt. You see now it has been merged into one piece. Now I'm going to relax. So this does match the axe, or the, I don't know what it is called. So I'm good with this. I will do right click, make sure you do that, right click and collapse alt, so to apply the changes. And now let's deal with this. So I'm going with this one is I'm going to merge all of those into one. So I'm going to do attach these ones. It will make it into one object, so you can see it selected. You can select them as different elements, and the reason for that is because I want to unwrap it all at once. Unwrap. So you can see there is no green line within the middle, so you are good for now. So we can just select a projection map, or maybe a line should be all good. So maybe select as a face, select that, and peel, quick peel. This looks good. So so make sure that you can see the textures. So what you do is you go the top right box and make sure you checker pattern is on, and look at the boxes, at the checker box. Make sure that they are the boxes are equal. So open UV editor, let's turn on checker box, and if you look close enough we can tell that the boxes are the same. So this looks good. So right click, collapse all, and let's unwrap this one. So let's go, select the modifier, unwrap, and you can see it as one object. So we can select all faces, we can see the projection map as a plane. So maybe we want to do it as on the y-axis, fit, and quick peel. This looks good. Right click, collapse all. And now we have these two. So we might face an issue with this one because there's a back face to it. So it does have a width, it does have a shell on it. So let's collapse all before we can proceed with the unwrapping. And we do want to create an edge on these, an edge right here, a seam, sorry, we want to create a seam along the edge side so they can be separated from the main shape. So let's do collapse all, let's select one of those, and if you want to add an editable poly as a plugin here, you can go under configure modifier and configure modifier sets, and you can look for unwrap UV. So let's see if we can unwrap UVW. So we click OK. Oh, I forgot to add it, my bad. So make sure show buttons is on, because if it's not, you will see those shortcuts are hidden. And let's click modifier, unwrap, and let's take that and drag it into one of those. So and click OK, and you can see it right here. So let's select that. You can see the seam being properly placed, and let's do quick peel, and it does look correct. So right now, even though the backside is not important, so this for now looks good. So for me, I would just make that smaller and maybe move it outside and do right click, collapse all, because painting it will not make a difference. So it's not important. And now let's do the same with the other one. So and now let's select the other one, unwrap UV, and looks like it follows the same suit as the other one because it was a duplicate. So let's do a quick peel, and this is the inside. Let's make that small, and let's move it outside because it's not important. Right click, collapse all. In a lot of cases, a studio might tell you just delete the whole thing. For me, I'm not going to delete it because it's too much headache. So right now I'm going to select all of those and select unwrap UVW, and now what we want is we want to open the editor so we can see all the maps, so we can see them, they are overlapping. We could do this to automatically organize it for us, and for now let's select the element and remove the not important ones. So I want to change to faces so we can see it clearly. So I don't want those. I will move them out. Make sure the checker is on so you can see and compare the checker for all, and with whichever one that has the most details, it is okay to make them bigger. So for example, this one, maybe it has a lot of details, a lot more details than the other one, so it is okay to make it bigger than the rest. And let's take these, rotate them, and maybe make it bigger as well. So let's take the other one, rotate, and the command line are the same with the UV. W for move, R for scale. Just make that a little bit smaller. Maybe you want to rotate it a little bit. Okay, so this is good. These are not important, so maybe you can make it smaller. I just move it aside. And now you have the UVW map done. So right click and collapse all. So this is good for now. The last step is you need to render the unwrap the UVW map. So again, just go under, I forgot to do the step, so my apologies. So you go under tools and render UVW map. So for now I will make it in 1024 by 1024, and you can do a render UVW map. And now you can save this as a JPEG or PNG. And now you can take it into Photoshop and you can start applying your hand painted textures. If you want to do a realistic texturing, it's all up to you. You are the artist, you can do whatever you want with it. Another way to do it, to paint, is you have a viewport canvas right here. So you can do painting within 3ds Max. So for example, you can start painting, so you just maybe let's do collapse all. Let's select this and start painting. What you want is diffuse color, so it will tell you how big it is. For now I will go with 512 by 512, and you need to save that somewhere. And you can do a Photoshop as well. I think you can do Photoshop. So I'm not seeing Photoshop, so I'm sticking with the JPEG. Usually if you work in a studio, you want to do TIFF, .tiff, but for me I don't care, so I'm just gonna go with this one, diffuse. Okay, and click OK. And now we can paint. So you can color sample the image, color sample. So use the colored eyedropper and select the color that you wish or you want, and start. You can use the paint bucket to paint the whole thing. And now you can select the color one, maybe change this to red to match this one. So you can use the eyedropper, maybe make it a little bit brighter. And just can adjust the width to make the shadows. So you got the point. Maybe you want to select the highlights. Want to make the image a little bit bigger. And maybe you want to make it a bit less. The opacity, maybe you want to change it a little bit down, because you might want to do a little bit of highlights. So you get the idea. So yeah, so you can do your texturing within 3ds Max. I don't know. And you can do the same thing with the other objects, make it look nice. You can also use Photoshop, Krita, Affinity Photos. You can use the texturing, and once you're done with it, let's say you have exited from viewport canvas, and if you go into the material itself, if you press M, you can see the material being applied automatically. So this is the image that we have created. So you can view the image right here. So you can see it right here. So you do have access to it. So if you want to do your painting and texturing within 3ds Max, you could do that, and you could also do it from a photo editing software. And before I end this nice little course, so let's add the other half. So let's apply a symmetry. We do not need to do the unwrapping, because that already has been done for us. So let's do that, and let's flip it. Let's do the same thing for those. Let's add the symmetry to the y-axis, and let's flip it, and let's move the mirror. And let's do the same thing for the wood. Symmetry, y-axis, z-axis. Okay, good. And let's do also, you could also use the mirror right here. You can select which how you want to mirror it, and it could be like a copy. So you have to be very mindful of the offset, so it doesn't have the flexibility of the symmetry, but you can see it. So you can move that manually. Let's remove the background images, so they are the frozen ones, so let's just hide those. And for now I want to remove the textures because it does not look good, so let's do that. And that's it for the course. And if you want, we can select those, the bolts, and we can parent it to this thing, to the wood. So if a character, if you have this animated with the character, so wherever it goes it follows it. So for example, if we animate it, so let's do that. Let's go into 30 and rotate it. Let's change the pivot to somewhere that is more believable, so we can change it manually with the pivot. So effect pivot, and because of the parenting, you can see the effects is being caused for it. So before we do that, let's break any relations. So let's go into the semantics, and let's break it. Let's break the relationship. So right now it's independent. Let's affect the pivot to somewhere more believable, so maybe in the middle right here, and let's do that, and let's select all of those and deselect the parent one. You see the animation is still on. You might want to turn that off before you do anything, because it will be animated. So select those, link it to the wood or to the handle, and now let's activate the arrow key and let's rotate it. We have forgotten the boss on the other side, so let's turn off the arrow key. Let's take that and parent it to the wood. Good. And let's turn on the arrow key and select the handle and rotate it. And now we have an animated game object. So far we have learned how to do modeling, we have learned how to do parenting, we went through the selection tool, the transformation tool, we went through the various windows that can do different things, such as see the parenting, the curve editor, the materials, the rendering settings. We also went through the modeling, changing the pivot. We also did some animation, and yeah, now you have enough tools to start on your own. You can make any project you want, and yeah, and good luck, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.